In the basement of the municipal archives of Carcassonne, beneath centuries of dust and silence, lies a leather-bound volume that should not exist. The Census of 1247. Most historians will tell you is lost in a fire, but here it is, its pages yellowed and fragile, its ink still dark against the parchment. And on page 73, there is something extraordinary. 7 families listed not by name, but by symbol. A fleur-de-lis, a rose, a star. Why would a royal census hide identities instead of recording them? While official history remains silent on this question, local traditions in the villages of Languedoc tell a different story. According to researchers who have dedicated their lives to these archives, this document may hold a key to one of France's most carefully guarded secrets, a bloodline that was never supposed to survive, a lineage that powerful forces tried to erase from memory. But as any genealogist knows, blood has a way of leaving traces, even when those traces are written in symbols instead of names. The woman who discovered this census was not a professional historian. Marie Duchamps was a retired librarian from Toulouse, tracing her own family tree when she stumbled upon the reference. A footnote in a 19th century tax record mentioned the symbolic census of the Languedoc families. Intrigued, she began to search. It took her 3 years to find it, misfiled under agricultural documents, as if someone had deliberately hidden it in plain sight. When she first opened the volume, she did not understand what she was seeing. The standard entries were there: Jean the baker, Pierre the blacksmith, lists of children, livestock, land holdings. But then there were 7 entries, no names, just symbols, and next to each symbol, unusual notations: protected by order of the crown, exempt from taxation, lands held in perpetuity. What kind of peasant families receive royal protection? Marie began with the simplest question: where were these families located? The census gave coordinates in the old system, measuring distance from the Cathedral of Albi. She plotted them on a map, and then she sighed. The 7 locations formed a perfect arc across the Languedoc countryside, each estate approximately 15 kilometers from the next, too precise to be coincidence. Someone had planned this distribution. Someone had wanted these families close enough to support each other, but spread out enough to avoid attention. The first estate she visited is now a lavender farm, owned by a family named Languedoc. The farmhouse dates to the 13th century, built of golden stone that glows in the afternoon sun. The current owner, Madame Bernadette Lavelle, is in her 70s. When Marie explained her research, the elderly woman nodded slowly, as if she had been waiting for this conversation her entire life. "My grandmother told me stories," Bernadette said, leading Marie through the old house, "about why we never changed our name, even when we married. About why certain portraits were always turned to the wall during official visits, in the attic." Wrapped in silk that had once been white was a painting. A young woman in the dress of the mid-13th century, her dark hair swept back from a face of remarkable beauty. Around her neck, a pendant, a fleur-de-lis. "We were told she was a distant cousin of the king," Bernadette whispered, "but that we must never speak of it outside the family." The pendant in the painting matches the symbol in the census exactly. The same stylized petals, the same proportions. This was no ordinary fleur-de-lis. This was the personal seal of the French royal house during the reign of Louis IX, Saint Louis, who ruled from 1226 to 1270. A seal that should never appear around the neck of a peasant woman in Languedoc. But what if she was not a peasant at all? Mainstream historians view such family legends as wishful thinking, yet for genealogists, the pattern is unmistakable. Marie found the second family within weeks. The Roussels, now living in Narbonne, also possessed an old portrait, also possessed stories of royal connection, also bore one of the symbols from the census, the rose. And like the Lavelles, they had been granted unusual privileges in medieval records, exemptions from feudal service, protection from the Inquisition during the Cathar purges, rights that ordinary families never received. The third family changed everything. The Montforts, living now in a small village near Béziers, had something the others did not: a letter, written in 1248, 1 year after the census, from a nobleman named Guillaume de Martel to the protected Lady of the Roses. The parchment is fragile, the ink faded in places, but the message is clear. Your daughter is well concealed among the families of the Ark. The king's sister sends her blessing and reminds you that silence is the price of safety. The child must never know her true name until the danger has passed. The king's sister. In 1248, Louis IX had one sister still living, Isabel of France, who never married, who devoted her life to religious foundations, and who, according to official records, had no children. But what if official records were designed to hide the truth? Genealogical research requires patience and skepticism in equal measure. Marie spent 2 more years gathering evidence. She found property deeds showing that all 7 estates had been purchased in the same year, 1246, by 7 different noblemen with connections to the royal court. She found marriage records showing that the daughters of these families often married into nobility, but always quietly, always without fanfare. She found tax exemptions that lasted for generations. And she found something else, a pattern in the names. Each of the 7 families used variations of names associated with the Virgin Mary: Lavelle from La Vierge Belle, Roussel from Rose, one of Mary's symbols, Montfort from Mont de Fleur, the Mountain of Flowers, another Marian reference. These were not random naming choices. They were code, a way of identifying these families to those who knew the secret, while keeping that secret hidden from those who might use it to harm them. But why would the king's sister need to hide a child? Why would royal blood need protection? The answer lies in the politics of 13th century France. Louis IX was a zealot, a crusader who believed deeply in the purity of the church and the divine right of kings. His sister Isabel was equally devout, but more compassionate. When she founded the Abbey of Longchamp in 1255, she wrote in her charter about protecting the innocent from the harshness of men's judgments. Researchers argue that Isabel may have borne a child out of wedlock, possibly the result of a brief relationship with a nobleman before she fully committed to religious life. In the ruthlessly moral court of Louis IX, such a child would have been a scandal. But Isabel was beloved by her brother. Perhaps he agreed to protect the child, but only if it disappeared completely from official record. Perhaps he arranged for the child to be raised in Languedoc, far from Paris, among families sworn to secrecy. The 7 estates would have been established to create a network of protection. If one family was threatened, the others could help. If the child needed to move, there were safe houses across the region, and the symbolic census ensured that even in official documents, the true identities remained hidden, a bureaucratic sleight of hand that preserved both the secret and the record. Marie's research led her to modern DNA testing. She contacted descendants of all 7 families, explaining her theory. 6 agreed to participate. The results came back on a winter morning in December 2019. delivered by email to Marie's small apartment in Toulouse. She read them with hands that trembled. The 6 descendants shared genetic markers consistent with a common ancestor in the mid-13th century. But more than that, they carried markers associated with the Capetian dynasty, the royal house of France. The probability of this occurring by chance, according to the geneticist report, was less than 1 in 10,000, while the Church offers a theological explanation for royal bloodlines and divine appointment. The local families preserve a more personal memory. They speak of a woman who lived quietly among them, who was known for her kindness and her learning, who founded a small school for girls in Carcassonne that operated for 200 years. They speak of a daughter who grew up knowing she was different, but never knowing why, who was told only that she carried a precious legacy that must be guarded. They speak of generations of women who passed down stories disguised as legends, waiting for a time when it would be safe to speak the truth. In the Lavelle farmhouse, Bernadette showed Marie one final artifact. A small wooden box, carved with roses and fleur-de-lis, containing a lock of dark hair and a ring. The ring is gold, worn smooth with age, engraved inside with words in medieval French, pour la fille cachée, pour la lignée gardée, for the hidden daughter, for the guarded lineage. My grandmother said this belonged to the first woman, Bernadette explained. The one who came here when she was young, carrying nothing but this box and a letter she burned after reading. The ring has been examined by experts. The gold is consistent with 13th century French metallurgy. The engraving style matches royal commissions from the period of Louis IX. The hair, tested for DNA, matches the genetic markers found in the 6 descendants. Every piece of evidence points to the same conclusion. These families are descended from a woman who was hidden in Languedoc in the middle of the 13th century, a woman who carried royal blood, a woman who may have been the daughter of Isabel of France. Whether one accepts this as history or legend, the endurance of the story proves something profound about the power of family memory. For 8 centuries, through wars and revolutions, through the Terror and the World Wars, through every upheaval that has shaken France, these families preserve their secret. They did not shout it from rooftops. They did not demand recognition or inheritance. They simply remembered. They kept the portraits and the letters and the stories, passing them from mother to daughter, from grandmother to granddaughter, waiting for the day when it would be safe to speak. If these ancient documents are to be believed, the implications for our understanding of medieval history are profound. They suggest that even the most carefully constructed official narratives can hide essential truths. They remind us that genealogy is not just about names and dates, but about the human stories behind them, the desperate mother protecting her child, the king who chose family over dogma, the generations of ordinary people who carried an extraordinary secret, not for glory or gain, but simply because it was entrusted to them. The census of 1247 remains in the archives of Carcassonne, available now to researchers who know where to look. The 7 families still live in Languedoc, connected now not just by ancient secrets, but by confirmed genetic heritage. And somewhere in the fields of lavender and vineyards of southern France, the wind still whispers through the same valleys where a hidden daughter once walked, carrying in her veins the blood of kings, and in her heart the weight of a silence that has finally, after 800 years, begun to break.